Good day, everyone, and thank you for coming to my TED Talk on this fine morning. Today I will be talking to you guys about an epidemic that affects 50% of all American children today, leaving them prone to a variety of short and long-term effects on their physical and mental health. Children affected throughout their lifetimes are on average 2 times more likely to develop lung cancer, 4 times more likely to develop a heart disease, 2.5 times more likely to develop hepatitis or chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, 8 times more likely to develop depression in their lifetimes, 12 times more likely to commit or attempt suicide in their lifetimes, and they can expect an average 20 years less life expectancy. Worst of all, although this epidemic affects 10% of our nation, our society has yet to recognize the seriousness of this issue and instate societal change. Hello, my name is Jason Caplin, and I'm here to tell you about how divorce affects children's short-term and long-term physical and mental health. Before I get into divorce, however, I first need to get into the cause of divorce: marriage. In marriage, there are 3 main cases. We have our marriages that truly do last till death do them part. We have our marriages that end in divorce. And then we have our marriages that are dysfunctional and the couple should probably get divorced, yet remain together for another reason. It would be wrong to say that all couples that experience divorce with children have issues co-parenting, maintaining a relationship for the sake of their children, and getting over the actual divorce itself. Although this happens more often than not, there are those cases in which couples who have divorced are more able to quickly move on, cultivate a respectful way to co-parent, and maintain a healthy relationship with each other. Divorce as well has adverse effects on different families, different children from within the same family, and even affects boys and girls differently. Children of divorce typically have higher anxiety levels and lower perceived cognitive competence levels than children of intact families. This allows these children to form an external locus of control. The term locus of control refers to both variations of an internal and an external locus. An individual with an internal locus of control believes that he or she can influence events and their outcomes, which has been known to raise confidence and the sense of control in one's life. Individuals with an external locus of control have the notion that regardless of their actions, their environment will either allow them to fail or succeed. On the occasion of failure, they blame their failure on the environment rather than their own actions. These children as well tend to have fewer closer friends, tend to spend less time with their friends, and tend to participate in fewer activities than their counterparts with married parents. There was a study conducted by Professor Wyman of Iowa University about the way college-aged women of divorce perceive their individual qualities. Wyman reported that not only did these girls report fewer qualities, they as well reported more negative qualities than their counterparts with married parents. Tragically enough, he also found these results in children from grades 3rd to 8th. Past research of traumas experienced through divorce has suggested that boys and girls experience a variety of effects. However, they are affected by their traumas at different points in their adolescence. With boys experiencing issues in later adolescence, typically ages around 16 to 18, and females experiencing issues in earlier adolescence, typically ages 13 through 15. Depressive symptoms increase with age during adolescence, particularly among girls. There have been a few suggested explanations for this female preponderance, such as an earlier pubertal timing compared to boys, dissatisfaction with weight and appearance, low self-worth or confidence, stress and a lack of social support, low self-competence, and an increased importance of sense of self and sexual identification. Experiencing lack of self-worth, depression, and anxiety issues in adolescence have been directly linked to higher rates of suicide, domestic violence, and drug abuse. This can lead to the lack of one's abilities with their relationships further in life, thus hindering their success in forming long-lasting relationships of their own. The ability to foster healthy relationships and to have a positive self-image allows for children to have an easier time in school as well as an easier time when adapting to different environments, such as experiencing a move, losing a close friend, or experiencing a large failure. Conversely, the children whose parents stay married but exhibit extreme conflict typically have the most psychological as well as the most difficulty establishing satisfying relationships later in life. While I was conducting my research, I came across a TED Talk by Nadine Burke-Harris. In her TED Talk, she makes a powerful analogy of walking through a forest and then coming across a bear. Immediately, she says, your hypothalamus sends a signal to your pituitary, sending a signal to your adrenal glands that then tells your brain to release stress hormones such as adrenaline and cortisol. Your heart starts to pound, your pupils begin to dilate, your airways open up, and your palms start to sweat. And then you're either ready to fight that bear or to run away from that bear. And that's great when you're in a forest and you come across a bear. But the difference is when this bear comes home every night, and this fight or flight response is activated over and over and over and over again, transitioning the response from being adaptive or life-saving to maladaptive or health-damaging. An individual's experience during adolescence is extremely influential on their academic accomplishments and performance in an academic setting. Research indicates that children of divorce attend school less, watch more television, and have less parental supervision of their homework. These factors may contribute to a lesser amount of academic functioning and academic success. A study conducted by Marianne Colony of the Chicago School of Professional Psychology indicates that the experience of parental conflict and divorce is consistently related to the development of poor relationships with parents and difficulties forging long-term relationships later in life. This can even occur when adolescents and young adults are no longer residing with the parents or are no longer directly exposed to the parental conflict. The lesser incentives and less conducive work environment in the home place experienced by children of divorce, as well as the lack of the ability to form close relationships with teachers, peers, and parents, can lead these children and adolescents to disassociating themselves from school, decreasing the chances of these adolescents continuing on to secondary or post-secondary education. After conducting research and realizing how much of a widespread issue divorce really is, I decided to conduct my own research. I did this by creating a survey and sending it out to all students at Animas High School as a way to kind of gauge their short-term afflictions of mental health as a result of divorce. So a total of 93 students took this survey, and of these 93 students, there were 38 who had divorced parents, and 20 of those 93 students had parents who had remained together yet experienced extreme marital conflict throughout their lives. I found a positive correlation with a confidence interval of 99% that adolescents who had divorced parents had the afflictions of anxiety and depression in their lives. Similarly enough, I found the same exact correlation with children whose parents had not been divorced though as well. This caught me off guard. I wanted to know why this was happening and what was going on. So I created some more independent research and started looking into this thing called the suicide belt. The suicide belt is essentially, the second you reach 2,000 feet in elevation, suicide rates skyrocket. Scientists are not really sure as to why this phenomenon occurs. They have these hypotheses such as the lack of oxygen on one's brain over a long amount of time, the easier accessibility to different weapons to commit suicide such as guns, and more intense isolation of living minutes away from your neighbors. So after I looked at this, I wanted to focus more on divorce and how that was impacting Animas High School. So I noted that and continued on with my research. And I then learned that 78% of adolescents who had experienced divorce in Animas High School had felt as their parents wanted them to choose sides. There's a positive correlation as well with a 99% confidence interval for survey respondents with divorced parents, and individuals having to become more independent as a result of that divorce. Of the 20 kids whose parents are still married yet experience chronic fighting, 60% felt very alone and isolated, 50% felt rejected by their parents, 40% had issues remaining resilient, and 65% had experienced the affliction of anxiety. 45% of these adolescents whose parents had experienced trauma or marital problems but had not yet divorced felt unsafe when their parents would fight, and when their parents were fighting, 55% of them felt neglected. When these adolescents were asked how their parents deal with aggression towards each other, 65% reported that they turned their aggression from each other onto themselves. So where do we go from this? We know that trauma experienced as a result of one's youth adversely affects their childhood experience, typically negatively, and can force them to grow up and mature before they are ready. Both the prior research conducted and the data I had collected indicates that when one experiences trauma in their youth, they have a varying range of short-term and long-term mental and physical health effects. The afflictions that youth show include, but are not limited to, anxiety, depression, and external locus of control, disassociation from academics, and difficulties cultivating long-lasting relationships. These effects differ between gender, yet are not skewed across ethnicities or use of harmful substances, such as alcohol. The survey respondents who had parents who had remained married yet experienced severe marital problems had data almost identical to the survey respondents who had divorced parents, indicating that these results are showing us that the afflictions to one's long-term mental and physical state and short-term mental and physical state are not a result of divorce, however, a result of unhealthy family conducts and unhealthy family relationships. Unhealthy family relationships are defined as one where the relationships within one's family construct are not conducive towards physical and emotional health. Healthy families tend to return to normal functioning after a stressful event, such as a car accident, whereas unhealthy families' problems tend to be more chronic and unsolvable. Negative patterns of parental behavior have been known to impact the youth's overall life experience and their genetic and sociological development. The transition of adolescence into adulthood can be impacted by negative experiences as well. As a result, adolescents, young adults, and adults have been known to brush off their problems on how they were raised. This only reinforces the cultivation of an external locus of control. Many parents do not realize that their behaviors and actions are harmful to their child's development. Many parents also tend to lack the tools to recognize their own behaviors or coping skills to handle their difficulties, and thus subconsciously can be instructing their child or children how to handle an issue in a negative manner. As a child of divorce myself, I have been dealing with this for almost as long as I can remember. I have two sisters as well, and after doing this research, I kind of looked at it and looked at my own life and realized how it has affected me and my sisters individually. I tend to kind of brush things off and to that external locus of control. Oh, it's not my fault. How could it be? It's just my environment. My little sister seems to be an anxious wreck and always comes up with 1,000 possibilities, none of which have ever occurred or will ever occur on this planet. And my older sister has such a horrible time accepting rejection that it really just diminishes her self-confidence. So looking at these issues and then looking at individuals, we can know that this is a real problem and that we have to make national changes in order to encompass it. We have the explicit data to show the effects of divorce and traumatic divorce out there, yet it is not ignorance to this topic that has let it grow throughout the past decades. It is the affliction of parents' relationships and their ability to properly carry out conversations and their actions to each other in a healthy manner. Parents need to recognize how every phrase and action of theirs in front of their child is either instructing them how to talk to others in the future or how to act to others in the future. It is necessary that as a nation we recognize both how traumatic divorce and unhealthy parental relationships unhealthy parental conduct affects one's youth and their development into adulthood, as well as how one's development can be hindered due to short-term and long-term effects on their physical and mental state. Thank you.